right now from RBC, and it's looking at just how the next generation can prepare for the good and the bad. BNN's regular guest Tony Chapman talks about why this report and what in this report really grabs his attention.
Very all, I love this title, Humans Wanted in the Age of Disruption, and it made me read the executive summary. Then I went through a 42-page report, not very unusual for me, and I read it twice because I think every parent, everybody in the private sector, the public sector, academia, every Canadian should read this because it impacts the lives and livelihood of our people and obviously our country going forward.
So RBC is saying basically very few jobs are going to be safe over the next decade. At least 50% are going to face disruption.
Yeah, so they harnessed economists and they looked at public-private sector. They took this group and they boiled it all up. And a couple of things that were very shocking. First of all, right now, 500,000 youth between the age of 15 and 29 unemployed, another 250,000 involuntarily part-time employed. And these people, a lot of these people have very expensive degrees. But right around the corner, like just banging down the door in the next 10 years, 4 million more youth, the largest generation ever, is going to enter the workforce, but at a time when technology is hitting business like a sledgehammer. And we're not just talking about the old adage of, yeah, that's just automating, assembly workers. We're talking about machines that are doing audits and legal files and reading x-rays and a whole gamut of stuff. And they're saying half the jobs are going to need completely new skill sets, and another 250,000 might be rendered obsolete, or 25% and 50% might be rendered obsolete.
Our whole definition of what is an expert is going to change.
Oh, without question. I mean, you're looking at the sense of, I used to get my business degree and then I followed and pursued this path in life. And this is what the RBC study is telling us, is that's a very different world they're entering. It's almost like if you look at stepping stones and you're walking along these stepping stones and suddenly new technology jumps up. Well, instead of freezing, they're saying you need the skills to harness that, to redefine yourself, to reimagine and reinvent. So instead of this world of one path, you can be quite nomadic as you skip through life, and you're going to have to continuously learn.
What does Canada need to do now that it's not doing?
I think there's a lot of things that we can look at. First of all, we've got to say, what are the skills we need? I mean, these silos of, that's how academic runs, and that's how the private sector and the public sector. We're going to have to find a way to knock those silos down. And people don't like change, and people like to have this self-preservation. I want to keep with my world. So we're going to have to say, you know what, the collective interest of the country is at stake. So we're going to have to find a way to reinvent learning, for example. I think curriculum is going to have to be taken out of the hands of academics and put into the public sector, saying these are the kind of talent we need, or we're envisioning we will need. This is the kind of education they'll need to pursue.
I mean, just thinking about the high school system right now, are they turning out kids with the right skills?
No, I mean, why do we have terms? Why aren't people able to gamify education? Why can't you learn at your own pace? And this study is interesting. It talks about things that's obvious. You're going to need data, analytics, the ability to create patterns with all this moving information. You're going to need math. 70% of the jobs are going to require math skills. I get that, coding. But the other thing they're talking about is the softer skills, communication, collaboration, critical problem solving. So we got to start thinking, how are we teaching people to adapt and change on the fly? So in other words, I think I'm all set up. I've got my medical degree. Well, that's not a setup. That's just some things in your knapsack. As we go along and things change, you have to have the ability to adapt. I'm not sure we're teaching that in this frozen term, frozen university, one thing moves to the other. I think there are a lot of parts that aren't moving in cohesion.
Cooperation, that's going to be a crucial skill, but you have concerns there as well.
I do. I mean, I think that we're spending a lot of time on our sets, and we're spending a lot of time in this virtual world. Are we learning how to collaborate and communicate? Because the interesting thing now is business is no longer tethered to big cities or even geographic boundaries. It's connected to the cloud. So if we don't find these workers, these organizations are going to go elsewhere to find them. So, collaboration and ability to work across cultures, across countries, across different sets of data, that ability to be that impresarial, that bringing it all together is going to be paramount in terms of the future of youth working.
And just remind us, where are the jobs of the future likely to come from?
Well, it's interesting. They've identified 6 clusters. They're almost like these magnetic forces that draw people in. Some of these clusters will be quite immune to disruptive technologies. Others are highly vulnerable. 2, for example. One is solvers. Solvers are, this is where you want to be. This is where you're taking all these bits and pieces of technology. You're taking your labor, your leadership, and you're envisioning the future. This is human ingenuity at its best, and they're always going to have a job, but they're going to need that critical thinking, collaboration, leadership skills. Then there's the doers. I'm just doing things. I'm doing transactions. Well, machines, they get faster, better, cheaper. They're going to eliminate you. So you look at these clusters in the study, and you start saying, where do I have the best chance for success? Clearly within your interest and your personality, but that's going to be a big part of it.
What about the universities? Are they doing a good job of preparing people?
They've identified some like Waterloo co-ops, even some high schools, even organizations like Shopify that have created this vertical integration of talent. But they're isolated. And I think what we're going to have to start doing is start thinking about, why is universities a separate entity? Why isn't learning and organizations all connected into this ecosystem? Because instead of this days where I got my education and off I go, again, continuous learning means, how can private sector and the academia work together to make sure that my people along the way in this path in life are constantly find a way to rethink and retool? They've actually used some youth in there to talk about, yeah, I started off as a nurse and I had medicine and I ended up over here. In the sense of course correction, I think universities are going to have to be part of it. But, tenured professors, that's the textbook we've always taught. That's the terms that we like because we want our summers off, is very different than learning at the speed of life.
So do we all need to really think about a future, or certainly these young people, in which you're essentially going to be self-employed?
You're self-employed. We've got to think about it from the youth, but anybody that's got a career right now should be reading this report, because you have to envision you're going to have to do career pivots for the rest of your life. You're going to have to find a way to go, I had these skills, I had this job's disappearing, technology's taking me out. Where can I take this knapsack full of talent that I have and passion and shining eyes and bring it to somewhere else? And I think that when you talk about this kind of future works, and again, I don't work for RBC, but what I love is talk is cheap. They're putting $500 million over the next 10 years against it, but they're saying that's just a drop in the bucket. We want to be a catalyst, but we have to bring people together. And how do you get Canada, silos, to come together and say, you know what, it's not working anymore. We have to start thinking about, how are these 4 million people going to have purposeful jobs going forward?